Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smallenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
All right, welcome back to today's episode. One of the reasons we do what we do at FDS is so that our clients can live more and give more. We want to help you order your finances so that you can pour into what matters most to you. So we thought that we should share what we care about too. In an episode earlier this year, our executive producer, Anna, interviewed me, and I want to do the same thing with our team. So today we have our COO joining us, Trevor Meyer. Welcome, Trevor.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be great to hear more about your why and what you care about.
Yeah, happy to be helpful as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, yeah, you're always kind of saying, hey, if you need me to do something, just tell me to do it and I'll do it. So,
Yep.
So we were like, let's start with Trevor. We'll get it over with.
Here we are.
No, this is going to be good. So Trevor, I know this about you, but you have a lot of very specific knowledge in areas, within finance and a lot of other things in life too. But you also have a very focused personality, kind of, I know what we're trying to accomplish. And something I've heard recently is once you know what it is, like whether it's a goal or what you're focusing on, then everything else that comes up, decisions or questions, either get you closer to that or not. And you're a person who asks that question a lot and kind of says, well, then we don't do it. Like if it gets us closer to that, great, that's what we do. But if not, then we don't. And so I know that about you, and that can be a very good thing, especially with how you help our clients with getting things done. So I think that's going to be fun to kind of hear your personality come out in your story. So I'm excited to hear this. Let's jump right in. It is really important. There is an importance of focus in our lives because we want our clients to live more. But if you aren't focused, you may not feel like you are living more or enjoying it. Then it's all just kind of work and unenjoyable and unfulfilling. And so it's kind of this where your abilities, your passion, and your story overlap. And so those are kind of the things that we're going to talk through today. Why don't you take us kind of before you even, went to get your degree in financial planning, kind of where did that interest come from? Kind of, take us back to what led you even to deciding to get a degree in financial planning.
Yeah. So I think starting at the beginning is always a great spot. I can actually trace my desire and passion for financial planning really back to walking in the halls of Pamplin Hall, which is a building at Virginia Tech, which is where I went to school. I was originally signed up and I was going to be an economist. That's what my degree was in. And I was super excited. I wanted to be a macroeconomist for the Fed and just work on charts all day and stuff like that. And I just happened to see a pamphlet or a flyer, on the wall for a financial planning program. And I was like, oh, that could be interesting. Let's, just check it out just to see. I wasn't exactly looking to change majors, but I was at least open to, hey, this looks interesting. It really was an hour-long conversation with the program advisor. Her name's Dr. Ruth Litton. Shout out to Dr. Litton. She's awesome. But had 1 hour conversation with her, and that truly changed the trajectory of my professional career. Being able to meld the whole idea of connecting people with their finances and alongside coming along, figuring out what actually means the most to them and how can you build a plan so that their goals, their values are all fully organized directly to that. Because we can get advice through, the internet of, hey, I did this, this, and this. But if a client's not trying to do what that other person's trying to do, well, you're going to go a completely different astray. So yeah, for me, it really came down to that flyer on the wall. I just started signing up for financial planning classes. And that's what I ended up getting my degree in. I will say, technically speaking, my degree is in agricultural and applied economics. Absolutely no background in agricultural aspects, or it's just where the financial planning program fell when I graduated. I think it's changed since then, but yeah, I often tell that to folks, and they get confused because I know nothing about farming. I know nothing about plants, but I've learned a little bit about financial planning. So
Well, I think that's one of the interesting things with the financial planning degree is there's almost like this counseling aspect to it and working with people. And so even, at Kansas State, it's not in the business school. And I think people would think that it's a business, degree, but there's so much personal and family counseling too, and those aspects. And so, it gets put into a different college. So interesting that it was in the agriculture college.
Yep.
So they're like, which one do we throw this in? Okay, so that's fascinating that you actually wanted to work at the Fed as a macro economist. So what even got you there? How did you even want to do that? In high school, was there an interest in math, or what led you there?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been decently good at math. Between math and language or whatnot, I always gravitated towards math and just trying to figure out problems and solve problems and look at things. And like every high schooler, I was infatuated with money and stuff like that. How can I do this and this? So I think there was an element of, at some point in my life, I said, I want to be super rich and And in fact, I even set out goals, and that has very much since changed. I'm not focused on money in terms of, how can I accumulate as much as possible. But back then, it was basically one of those things that I was trying to figure out, what can I do in terms of, just learning more about this and connecting with this. And, I was just curious of how does money play a role in people's lives, and what are the big top-down decisions that you can make to enhance people's lives and make them better off. And that's where I really found economics just super helpful in that regard. And I was always just more focused on the top down rather than the micro economics portions. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you want to do the macro economy, start at the top. And if that's what you love is the big picture. But I think that's so interesting that it came actually from like an interest in like really kind of how do I have more? How do I talk us through that? Like what were you interested in? So like how you can get a good deal, how you could earn more if you have a job, like money.
I mean, if I'm honest, a lot of it came from, especially at a younger age, kind of came from just an element of greed. I just wanted to have as much as possible, and I had all these dreams that I could have these big fancy cars and a big fancy house and stuff like that. And I don't think those are necessarily bad inherently, but I think the motivations behind them is really important. Understanding, okay, why do you want a luxury vehicle or something like this, or something that's really high end? My big dream car that I had on a list of goals was an Aston Martin. And the whole reason I wanted that car was because I thought it was the coolest car in the world when I saw it in the James Bond movies, right? Granted, I don't really care about having an Aston Martin now, but at the same time, if I found a deal for one or whatnot and kind of satisfy some of those childhood itches, it's like, hey, maybe you could do that, but they're still very expensive vehicles. So I don't know that I would go after one right now. But in terms of, how do you align? What are the things that you want out of life, and how can you just come alongside people and figuring out what those elements are? So yeah, for me, it was, historically speaking, it wasn't kind of a greed element, but thankfully, I think I've matured in a lot of respects in that. But recognizing there is still some underlying goals of say, okay, hey, I want this because of that, and how are you getting led and focused on that direction? So.
No, I just think that's so interesting because one of the things that you're really interested in is cars and racing. Tell us a little bit about what you like to do, because I know there's different types of racing, but what is it you're interested in?
So I have always loved racing. My dad, actually, when I was growing up, we would spend a lot of weekends at the track. And because he raced on an amateur level, the joke I always like to tell is, these are guys that are racing as hard as they can for a $5 trophy at the end. Right, so it's not professional racing or anything like that, but because that's a whole another deal. But growing up, we just spent a lot of weekends at the track, and I was always really mesmerized that you could take a car and do really exceptionally crazy things with it, more than most people would imagine. Right, so even just your basic cars on the road, it's amazing the amount of performance that you can get out of them. And I've just always been really curious and interested with that. And that even to the point where when I was 16, I was able to start going to race school and start going through, okay, how can I get on the track, and just spend a lot of time myself on the track in addition to my dad. So did a number of drivers events, and even as I've gotten older, we've done a couple of races. But The more specific type of racing that I really like it's called road racing. So it's not oval track where you're making left-hand turns. And it's not drag racing where it's just straight line. It's basically left and right turns, braking points, accelerating points, hitting the apex. It's all these things. Is okay. How can you figure out racecraft where if you've got another vehicle that is well matched with yours, how can you set that car up? Say, hey, I want to get this pass done in the next 2 laps. Okay, well, what do I need to do in turns 3, 4, and 5 in order to get the turn or get the pass completed by turn 7? So it's all the, hey, I have a goal. I want to get to turn 7. I want to get past this car, but I need to start making decisions at turns 3, 4, and 5, even a lap ahead in order to get to that point. So, yeah.
No, I think that's so cool. Well, and this is something that you love. So it makes sense that when you were kind of like, oh, money, cars, and there's a specific car, it all like, it's just interesting how our stories weave together. And so I'm like, oh, I know you love cars, and it's fun for people to know. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people who enjoy them too. And so you guys can talk all day about that stuff. So That's so fun. Oh,
The
nice.
other quick little aside, so it's just a fun little tidbit. I still have my very first vehicle. So I call it all red because it's a very old car. In fact, it's older than I am. It's a 1986 Volkswagen GTI. And so it's sitting in my driveway right now. Still has to get a little bit of work done. But once I get the engine started, so it's got some electrical issues and stuff like that. And it's also leaking coolant. But once it's up and running, it actually does run pretty well. And it's amazing what you can do with that little car. So.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like when you know how to work on cars, I mean, a lot of people, think of their cars kind of, how do I use this to get from point A to point B, just in normal everyday life. But, when you know how to work on them and you know how they work and function, and then you can start to kind of mess with them and change things, it does. It changes it completely.
Yep.
So, okay, so we kind of know now, like how you got into college, how you kind of got into that degree. Take us then from, okay, you now have this agriculture, financial planning degree.
Sure.
So you have this. Where did you go from there? What did you want to do?
Yeah, so I actually before I graduated, I went on a road trip with my best friend at the time. And we went literally all across the country. So we took the southern route. I don't remember what interstate that is, but we left Virginia Tech and went all the way out to California. And quick another side note, I know it's another driving thing, but my two favorite drives ever are one. There is Route 1 in California when the sun's setting and you're just going up the coast. That's one of the most beautiful drives ever. So we went all the way to California. And then on our way back, we took a more northern route. So we got to see a lot of different states, a lot of different things, this and that. But one of the places that we stopped was Chicago. And I will say it wasn't exactly the smartest kid in the room, but basically when we came through Chicago, it was summer. We went downtown. It was beautiful. We went down to the Miracle Mile, went down to the lake. It was just an idyllic day, right? Never mind that I had no idea or conception. I had no family, had no friends, stuff like that, or no support structure here in Chicago. But I said I want to live in Chicago. Never experienced winters here, never stuff like that. But it's one of the things that I made a decision. That's where I wanted to go. So on our way back, basically I made that realization, and then following that, I did everything that I could to get an internship out here in Chicago, as well as getting a job. So the firm that I got an internship with that following summer was actually the same firm that I worked for a number of years. And then I left and started my own firm for a couple of years before merging it into FDS. So.
Okay. So you came here. How long did you work at your first firm?
Just under 7 years. It was 6 years and almost 7 years. So.
Okay. Then there was just a point where you're kind of like, you know what? I want to be able to help, clients that I want to help. And then you started your firm, or was, kind of just that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's multifaceted. I think it's one of those things that I kind of came in with the expectation and that, there would be a succession plan involved. And I think at a certain point, I kind of realized that one, that wasn't going to happen, recognized that there were some pretty significant differences in how, treating clients and connecting with them and stuff like that. So just recognize a lot of different things. I was like, I don't know that this is the best long-term spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to start at a certain point. And so, yeah, I decided I'm going to go out and start my own firm. And that was 2017 is when I did that. So.
All right. So you launched your own firm, and now I'm sure that was easy, enjoyable. Walk us through that process, what you learned.
Yeah, I learned a lot of things that I love doing and a lot of things I really don't like doing. And that's, I guess, another testament to just the merger that we had and the partnership that we had. Mm-hmm. But some of the things that I've just loved doing is how can I just save clicks and keystrokes, right? So how can I either, whether it's writing scripts, like learning how to code. I had a little bit of experience at my first firm, but just expanded that tremendously when I started my own firm. It was called Presence Financial. Yeah, how can I expand that and just make that even more a core element of, doing our daily work? But one of the things I realized I absolutely did not like doing was the whole marketing side, building out the website, doing the forums, introduction, the prospect process and stuff like that. I'm just not built to kind of be a, what I call people person. I tend to say, okay, kind of inward focus, connecting with people and stuff like that. But it is, it takes energy, a lot of energy for me to connect with people on a more sociable basis. So.
Mm-hmm. It's not that you're not social. And because, when you're working with clients, you care about them. Mm-hmm. And so you could sit on a call and help them complete what they need to complete and have a conversation about anything. Yep. So it's interesting because sometimes it's different. It's like when I know who I'm talking to and, I work with you all the time, like that's different than someone who's new. And there is an element of kind of, okay, you're evaluating me for, what I know I can do for you. And that's different. So, because I would say like you can have really good conversations with people, and go really deep, because of your focus and because of your personality too. So it's interesting that you notice, that you're like, oh, but that is not my skill set, that type of, maybe communicating.
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things that I like to go deeper in terms of learning more about folks, because it's really important to me from a values perspective, understanding what is their core value, like what is their why. I ask my sons this. One's 2, so it's almost 3, so he doesn't quite understand it. But my older one, I ask him, okay, what is the why, right? You want to do this, you want this toy, or you want to watch this movie, or you want to do this activity, whatever it is. Okay, tell me the why. And the whole reason I'm starting that now is because I genuinely feel once you understand what your why is in doing that, and not just the service level, right? We're talking a couple levels down. But once you understand what your why is, now you actually get to the core of, okay, your why is where eventually, it's going to drive your decision. Where are you going to go from not understanding your why? And once you know where you want to go, then, to me, it does kind of come into the focus of, okay, am I doing something that's going to get me there? Or is that going to be a distraction? Or is that actually going to get me further away? Recognizing that sometimes the distractions are needed because if we keep laser focused the whole time, it's exhausting. But at the same time, sometimes we need to change and we need to U-turn and we need to have a quick detour, right? I think those are all okay things as long as we say, all right, what is our main focus at the end of where do we want to go? So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you know what others care about, what you care about, it actually makes it very easy to kind of say, okay, then let's do that. And you're connecting and you're saying, well, ultimately I'm helping you because I care about what you care about and I want to help you accomplish that. So if we're talking about living more, giving more, we're trying to encourage that. And so, sitting on an hour-long phone call with Schwab or something like that could be trying. But if you care, that like you're going to do whatever you need to do to help them. So, so I think that's really important and really, huge. But I love that you're asking the boys about that because I think sometimes, even as adults, I think sometimes it's like, well, why do you want that? Or why did you choose that? I think people know why. They know their why if they think about it, but I think sometimes they don't realize it until they're asked. And so they just kind of do it. But I think once you start to ask the why, it actually helps other people kind of look inside themselves and to kind of say, oh, well, this is why, and start to learn. It helps you learn about yourself too. Like, oh, this is what's driving some of these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best examples, I think, of, kind of asking why and digging deeper and learning more about people is I also serve through our church, through our youth group. It's called just Chapel Students, but I'm able to just kind of come alongside a lot of the high school boys and just, okay, what's going on in life? What do you want to bounce questions off? How can, help develop your faith and stuff like that? And it's not uncommon that, one of the guys will, hey, can I have a quick conversation of this and that? And, for whatever the reason would be or whatnot, I really consistently ask, okay, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? What's the drive? What is this? And I've boiled it down to literally asking, okay, what is your why in this? And it's kind of like an inside joke because they know anytime that they're going to, pull me aside or whatnot, one of the first questions I would ask, okay, what's your why? You said that you want to go on this band trip and you want to do this as opposed to this and this. What's your why? What's the driving aspect behind that? So it's you can make it kind of like a joke thing, but as long as you're pushing forward and gaining progress, I think the focus is, hey, you're getting to the spot you want to be, but you're also getting held accountable to it too.
Yeah. Do you ever find, this is something I think is interesting. So when you ask someone their why and they hear it for themselves, and let's say they're kind of like, oh, because I want to have more money, whatever. Let's say it's something that it's a why that they're not necessarily proud of and they almost feel bad that that's their why. I find that sometimes it's hard to get people to say their why because they're like, oh, that sounds bad. But it's like, oh, now we have something to work with, and it's like, oh, flesh this out a little bit more. So do you ever find that, sometimes just asking people what their why is helps them to say it and then to kind of work through, do I like that? Do I not like that?
It does. I think where I actually get encouraged is, okay, that top level one is more often not the true one, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things of, okay, well, I want this because that. What's my first one? All right. Tell me more about that. Why is that important to you? And then you start getting a client, well, shoot, I don't know. I've always focused on, I want this. Okay, well, why do we want that? Well, what is that? When you go like 3 levels down, I think that's actually when you get to the core of how folks are making decisions. Because that is really important of, the true why. But you're absolutely right of, the first one may be kind of a not so nice thing as other people would look, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's one of those things of that's a starting point, right? We know what that is. We can work with it. Let's figure out what is driving that, because there is something driving that portion too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing where as you work through that, you're really getting to the core of things. And I think sometimes as humans, we just do things because other people do them when it's actually against or kind of contradictory to what we actually value or are passionate about. And so in a sense, we're saying like, we want you to have permission to be you, to love what you love, to love doing what you're doing. And if that means traveling, if that means babysitting your grandkids and, retiring and doing those things, great. If that means, retiring from your current job and going to teach in a school because you care about kids, like, we want you to have permission to do that. And I think that's the thing where sometimes if we don't ask ourselves why, we just kind of go along with what others are doing and we don't really say, but wait, there is something that's important to me. When you had your business, when you were running it, you kind of said like there were some things that you learned you didn't enjoy doing. Walk us through now, because now that we are a team and we, keep going with that and kind of that process of merging. But also, now that we are a team, are you able to focus on the things that you enjoy and, maybe not do the things? Walk us through a little bit more of, kind of keep going with your story.
Yeah. So, I think after running Presence for a couple of years, I was actually approached by you and Steve, and we had breakfast one morning, just kind of chatting through certain things of, okay, what do you enjoy doing about your business? I think that was actually one of your questions. Steve is also exceptionally good at asking good questions. So kind of just unpacking some of that and just kind of talking through what we've already talked through, but. I think there was a realization that once the 4 of us connected and met between yourself, Steve, Rob, and myself, We basically kind of started to realize that even from a financial planning focus, we all have different expertise around different areas. And then even from an internal focus, we all have different expertise in different areas. And I think there's a really good balance there because, the stuff that I'm really bad at and I just don't like doing, more often than not, there's one of the partners that is very happy to step into that. It's like, oh, I love doing this, right? And likewise, the same thing if someone doesn't want to work in a spreadsheet all day, it's like, okay, give me a spreadsheet, let me work all day in it, right? So it's one of those things of having the strengths picked up by others' weaknesses, or having your weaknesses picked up by others' strengths is just immensely important. So I think that's one of the things that was really key for me as we were evaluating the merger and the partnership. Since we merged, gosh, we're coming up on 5 years now. It's been a long time, Michelle. But
great.
So even as I evaluate that with these past 5 years, am I able to do the things that I really love doing? The short answer is yes, right? Even right now, I'm working on a project just to work through student text files for student loans because someone needed an evaluation done and a tool we had used before is not working properly. So now I'm actually able to unpack that, reformat everything, so we have a really good tool to use on a go-forward basis for other clients. Additionally, it's also working through how can we see the data that Steve just did. Call it under 200 tax returns, just under. How can we see this data and look at this? Okay, clients are doing this. What's the progressions that we're seeing? And how can we make decisions and help other people in the future? What are the things we need to work on internally to say, hey, is it communication? Is it changing the way in which we do things or whatnot? But once we have all that data, crunch it and review it, now we can make really good decisions for the rest of our clients on a go-forward basis. So.
Yeah. No, and I know I appreciate every time when there's a spreadsheet and we can just say, hey, we need to evaluate this. And we're trying to create, tools that we can reuse because we know these are consistent questions that people have. Our clients are very similar and we want to make sure. And so doing that as efficiently as we can in a custom way. So everybody is going to have a different answer and we're going to need, it's going to have a different outcome, but there's ways that we can evaluate it the same. And so trying to be efficient within the business. And so a lot of what you're doing is really helping with that to then use that information or those technology pieces to actually, do that efficiently. Yeah.
That's cool.
No, that's helpful. Okay. So, so you went from present, so now FDS. You have a strength in, or kind of like an extensive knowledge in life insurance, or just, insurance in general, but life insurance. And that's something like, that's kind of one of your strengths, on our team that we say, that's Trevor. Walk us through kind of how did you gain that knowledge? Was that something you were really interested in, or you just kind of did at your first firm?
Yeah, so the owner and his father actually worked with an insurance carrier to basically build a product. And it was it was a really cool product in the fact that it didn't have any commissions when the policy was put into force, didn't have any surrender charges. It was essentially a term contract with investment options. Now, there were a little bit more expenses than just investing in like a brokerage account or whatnot. But for folks that needed the insurance, for folks that had extra cash that wanted tax deferral on it and wanted to protect for other various purposes, it was actually a really great product. I unfortunately don't think that they sell it anymore. I'd have to go back and check. But so I'm not sure if it's available anymore. But long story short is we had a number of clients that had this contract, and it was basically getting to the point where we wanted to make sure we were properly managing these for clients. And it came down to, okay, we need to get this data out. So we basically get all the data out as much as we can. We parse through it and just started assigning it to the individual client's policy. And it was built on a spreadsheet. And through that process, I started learning, okay, well, because of this, then that, and because of this, then that. And that's really where I deepened a lot of knowledge to understanding, okay, how insurance works, why it works, and where it actually makes sense for a lot of clients. Recognizing that at the end of the day, the insurance landscape is constantly changing and evolving, and there are always new contracts out there, there are new policies available. So while I may have a good understanding of insurance, it's one of those things I often find myself looking up, okay, what's new, what's changed, what's different as we have a new client case coming through. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's interesting too is just you have this background knowledge of knowing what to look for, because, so many times people will get kind of that annual statement that shows maybe the value of it and the face amount of the insurance that they have and the premium that they're paying. But you don't really know necessarily much more from that annual statement that you get. But in order for you to actually analyze a policy, we say, well, do you have the original policy or, kind of an illustration, that's up to date, like an in-force illustration, things like that. Like we start to kind of ask for some of those. So it's just interesting. And I think what's really valuable is what to look for, where to look for it. Even if it is a different type of policy, there's just, all life insurance kind of has specific components to it. So.
One thing that I will attest to my old boss, that he basically stuck this phrase in my head and has never left, but life insurance is first and foremost a contract, right? Mm-hmm. A life insurance contract is always that first. It's a contract between you and the insurance company. And because there's a contract, there are a whole lot of terms and conditions associated with you purchasing that contract that all play a role. And you'd be surprised how often something comes up in a little fine print that actually makes a difference for the client. And, it's not just a one and done, here's the general rule of thumb and just go with that all the time. You really have to look at each one individually. So
I think what's funny is sometimes you'll be reading through a policy and there's like this light bulb moment where you're like, oh, now I see where the thing is. Like, This is where that rate is. And so it's interesting because you kind of see like the catch sometimes within the policy. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that you would see a policy phrase and sold in a certain way. Oh, this is going to be like the best thing ever and stuff like that. And it's not necessarily always bad, but it's definitely what is sold and what's actually reality happening.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So there is, like, we've kind of talked about a couple specific things that you have knowledge about, that you care about, that you have interest in. But kind of give us, like, if you kind of step back, like, what do you feel like it is that, I guess here at FDS, what makes you passionate about what you do here? And then even just personally, kind of some of those things, what you care about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of comes back to on the personal side, first and foremost. I've actually kind of, since we've merged, really kind of gotten onto this journey of the aspect of just recognizing that I'm not living to work, I'm working to live. And it's, when I can focus first on my family, on my friends and faith and stuff like that of, okay, how am I kind of going about through my daily day? When I have that as a mentality, it actually influences how I'm going about work, right? So, we talked a little bit before where, I do have a focused mentality, and that for me comes back to, okay, my goal is I want to make sure I'm spending time with my wife, with my kids, with my friends and stuff like that. I need to, in order to get all this done, because there's a lot of work that has to get done, and me getting distracted is something that's very easy to do. So, I can get very distracted very quickly. So I tend to focus hard on, okay, one project, I'm doing this, getting this all done so I can hand it off and make sure it's in its best shape possible for someone else to pick it up if they need to. But for me, it comes back down to, on a personal level, how can I make sure that I'm able to do the things for my family and for my friends and whatnot that I want to do, while making sure that the professional side is taken care of. I don't know if that's a really good answer, if it's just kind of walking the line, but.
Yeah, no, I think, I think what's interesting is personally, and I think a lot of people are very similar, we have a lot of things that we are passionate about or that are valuable to us. And so there's a lot of parts of our lives, and work is one of those pieces. And so when you're here and you're working with clients, like, I know, because you'll say it a lot, and we have so many conversations where we genuinely care about our clients. And so when something's happening and we're like, oh man, why is this so tough, to get done? Or why is there so much paperwork for this? Like, we almost feel that like clients, like we care about them. And I think that from what I see, that kind of drives a lot of the things that you do. And you're like, no, this is what's right. We need to make sure this gets done. And, so I know that from your personality, that's what I kind of see in how you're caring for clients. What's cool about what we do is that because in our lives, as you said, personally, that your wife, your family, your, whether that's, your dad, your kids, like your family is important to you. And so it's all of that where you're kind of like, okay, those are important. Our clients are important, and they're people, they're relationships. And so it's all of that. And so we're fortunate to be able, with what we do, to get to care for people that we care about, since relationships are important to us.
Yep.
How do you feel like you balance that? So like you're saying, it's easy to get distracted, but you also do a good job of, making sure that you're spending time with people that are important to you and doing those things that you care about. So how do you feel like you go about kind of, setting time aside, or what does that look like when you're trying to balance that?
Yeah, know that there will be a bunch of people probably laughing about this or whatnot, but I live off the calendar, right? So I think in spreadsheets, and I live off the calendar. And as much as it pains me to admit, but I literally put on date nights with my wife or spending time with my boys on the calendar, because, as I mentioned before, I can get distracted really easily. And that's why when I see it on the calendar, one of my tabs open on my screen all throughout the day is what's on my calendar, what am I focused on, this and that. Even as an individual, project within work, it's okay. What is on the calendar? What am I setting aside time to work on this thing? Because again, it's easy to get distracted, for me at least. So in terms of finding that balance, it really is working on the calendar and making sure I have all of the data across all places that I need it to be, in order to make sure I'm doing the things that need to be done, and not the things that are just shiny objects that can steal my attention.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, because you're basically scheduling in things that are important to you. You're like, okay, it's in my schedule. I'm making time for it. The cool thing about that is you can look back and kind of show that you've made time for the thing. So a lot of times, people will say, show me your checkbook and your calendar, and I'll tell you what's important to you. So I think you're really saying like, oh, look at my calendar, because I have to remind myself, I have to make sure that I'm spending time with what I want to. So I guess in keeping that balance, how have you, because you mentioned, and this will kind of close us up, but like you mentioned, it used to be that you were like, oh, like greed might have kind of driven some of, the love of finance or money. But now you're like, oh, I don't have that mindset. Where do you feel like that changed? Like, what was that shift? Like, when did that change for you?
Yeah, it was probably a progression, but the one thing that really kind of kicked it off was actually transitioning to financial planning back in college, of really understanding that we can come alongside people and recognize that you're not looking to die with a big pot of money. And at least for me, working through, okay, what can we do with the resources that are made available to us throughout our lifetimes? That was really intriguing, and picking apart that a little bit further, it helped me even on a personal level. I was doing it professionally, making sure the clients were sorting out, and then I got to see a lot of the stories as where the progression comes, starting to work with clients. I got to see the stories and the things that they were able to do really kind of opened up my own heart in a lot of ways, and say, okay, again, we don't need X number of dollars for this thing, but we do need to provide Y dollars to make sure that this person is able to take care of whatever they need to, right? It kind of came back to the relationships where I just saw it more and more with clients. And I was like, oh, that's a really awesome way to live. And I'd be honest, I think I saw some really poor examples of that happening too, even amongst clients and, even friends and stuff like that. But I think it's one of those things that where you can kind of cherry pick, hey, I align with this. I'm not sure I align with that. And really kind of help mold and shape your path. It works out really to a good place where, hey, I know who I am. I know what my why is, and really focused in on how can I get from A to B in the most efficient way possible is kind of the general structure for myself. So,
yeah. Did you also think it's kind of like, from college, it's almost like still like a little bit of immaturity to kind of like, as you mature and then you get married and then you have kids, like some of that is just like natural progression, right? Of maturing and having to be the adult in the room, some little, but it's also important to live. And if there are things you enjoy, to do that. And sometimes that means you need money to do that. So
for a long time in my life, even when I started out professional career, I was really focused on, okay, how can I optimize my financial picture, right? How can I make sure that I'm funding all the accounts that I need to on a personal basis to make sure I'm doing this, this, and this. And really, as I've gotten older, it's one of those things that, yes, we have a goal. We want to save this amount for this year and here's why. It comes back down to, why are we saving this? Because I've already run the projections to say, if this happens, we have a likelihood of reaching this goal. And that's where Courtney and I, my wife, we've talked through and said, okay, this is what we would really love to be able to happen. This is what our quote unquote end goal, if you would actually be. Recognizing that we're celebrating 10 years this year. In the 10 years that we've been together, we've actually updated that goal a number of times, changed it and modified it, because what was originally important to us wasn't, and understanding that goals can change. But we're still always coming back to, what do we need to do on a year-over-year basis to get there? The little details, they're not as important as I once thought they were. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool. If you could summarize your why in like a sentence or two.
Summarize my why in a sentence or two. I don't think I was prepared for that question.
It's okay. And it's okay if not.
I would say on a core element, my why is, how can I want to support, encourage, and hold close the people that are most important to me, right? So I want to encourage my wife and help her project on to her career as being a nurse and do the things that she wants to do. Do with my sons as well, of what building them into the men that they are to be, and also how can I mold myself and make sure I'm living up to the man that God and my family kind of expect me to be. So kind of stepping in and leaning into all that. So that is definitely not one sentence. I apologize.
No, that's good. Thank you. Well, that's where I was kind of like, it's hard, because I feel like anytime someone asks you, it's like, well, how do I say this perfectly? Yeah. But sometimes you need to describe it and, kind of, and it looks different in, like we said, all of these different relationships. So,
yeah, I think as you're unpacking the question, as I've kind of practiced with it, for me, it's one of those things of, asking really directly. So if one of my personality things is I'm extremely direct, and it comes to bite me every now and again, because it can harm relationships. And it's never my intention, but I recognize it's a consequence. But that doesn't make it okay. So, but I do ask very directly, okay, what is important to you about that? And then start unpacking that and taking time through that discussion. So if I were to say, hey, spending time with my family and encouraging them and building them up, why is that important to me? Is because to me, that's a testament of how I can be as a father, as a husband, and, as a follower of Christ and all those things. And if I were to ask, okay, what's important to me about that? Because that's what gives my life meaning, I think, and not the dollars, not the things, not the this or that, it's the people. So maybe that was a better way to start off instead of shooting off the hip. So
I think it's great. No, I think it's a great answer, because it's kind of, what we're really trying to say is, when we're encouraging clients to live more and give more, whatever that looks like to them, we're ultimately saying, like, we're practicing what we're preaching. It's important to us too. And so that's why so much of what we try to do, what you're trying to do, is help clients see what's important to them so that you can encourage them too and say, well, let's do that then. So I think, it's just a reflection. It's very natural, because that's what you want personally. So then it comes out very naturally with clients too. So and I know clients see that and they know you care. And, you're kind of the person reminding people this needs to get done. Hey, I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to jump on and just, on Zoom or a phone call. And so it just comes off very naturally, but also like that's your strength. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Trevor. I think this has been just great to hear more about you personally, and even just your story of kind of how you got where you are. Any final things you want to share? Or, I think we kind of covered most of it, but.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to, and I've said this before, even on the podcast, of just recognizing that I was very fortunate and blessed to be in a position where I recognize, hey, this is some stuff I'm not good at. This is some stuff I do have some strength in. And then finding some other folks that can kind of complement those things really, really well. On a personal basis, it worked wonderfully with my wife. Courtney does so many things for our family that I'm just really terrible at. But even on a professional basis, Michelle, Rob, Steve, you guys do such an awesome job of just picking up where I really stink. And I think it's one of those things where you can find and surround yourself with those kind of people and those relationships. That's huge. So.
Right back at you, because I know we all feel the same way. So, and I know we all say it often. So,
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Trevor. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day.
It's great to share what you care about, but we want to help you put action behind your words. That's what working with a professional team like FDS does. We take the distractions and confusion out of the picture so that you can live more and give more. If you're interested in having this for yourself, why don't you reach out to our team? You can look at our website, www.financialdesignstudio.com. We'd love to talk about how we can partner with you, but until then, we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced, fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.